Good afternoon and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England, Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you are not speaking. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the officers. Emily Dodd is the Planning Manager Development. Greg Sharman on the end is a Team Manager for Area Planning. Stephen Bridges is the Area Planning Officer, and Alison Walker is the Solicitor on my left. I'd now like to move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Butler, Councillor Clark, Councillor Healy and Councillor Purdue-Horan. And substituting today, we have Councillor Edavine, Councillor Moore, Councillor Phillips and Councillor John Stockwood.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes. None. The minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of January 2023. Is it your wish that I sign them? Anyone got any proposed? Thank you. Everyone, thank you. Thank you very much. So we now move to, it says planning applications here, but we've only got one this afternoon. So the number is 20/03289 full. Tacit House, Hickling Lane, Upper Broughton, Nottinghamshire. The proposal is for extension and alteration of host dwelling to include two-storey side extension, two-storey rear extension, first floor front extension, single-storey front porch extension, single-storey rear extension, single-storey link extension to annex, and roof and fenestration alterations, the erection of detached garage and workshop, conversion and extension of single-storey garage into an annex to include a roof raise, a single-storey side extension and fenestration alterations, and associated landscaping works. Right, that's quite an extensive list of alterations today. And I will ask Mr. Richards to take us through the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to multiple extensions and alterations of Tacit House, including a garage conversion and the construction of a detached garage and workshop, along with associated landscaping works. No late representations have been received. So Tacit House is the furthest north property in the Upper Broughton conservation area, with positive open space adjacent to the rear boundary and a wooded area on site. So on this image, it's the furthest one north, kind of in the centre of that right section. It is noted that the right-hand side section of the land shown is outside of the limits to development and outside of the conservation area as set out in the neighbourhood plan. The nearest neighbours to the site are Brotone to the south, the Coach House and Sawney Fields to the east, and Sawney Fields is identified as a key unlisted building. So the application property is a detached dwelling finished in red brown brick. It predominantly has a dual pitched roof with front and rear facing gables, of which finished in a dark brown roof tile. The dwelling is split across 3 levels due to the topography of the site, which slopes down towards the northeast, and the rear facing 2-story gable, as you can see on the top image there, is on lower ground than the bulk of the dwelling. The property has a detached double garage located to the side of the host dwelling and positioned at an angle from it. And then the existing lower ground floor plan and the ground floor plan. And then the first floor plan and the roof plan. And as mentioned, you can see the kind of dual pitch roofs and the front and rear projecting gables, which are a theme in the conservation area. So as a general walk through and around the site, this is it from Hickling Lane, and you can see it beyond the hedging there. This is once you're on the site looking towards the dwelling and the detached garage. And again, from the front elevation, but further around the side. This is stood in that paddock that I mentioned to the side of the dwelling. And this is not within the residential curtilage, and you can see the line between the site and the paddock on the screen there, with the kind of the drop in the grass. So as you make your way around to the rear, you can see that rear gabled element that's on lower ground than the rest of the dwelling. And just walking around the site, there's a conservatory there which is to be removed as part of this application. And from the rear side of the garage, stood in a parcel of land to the north of the host property. And looking the other way towards this parcel of land with Brotone, the nearest neighbour, you can see the gabled roof just over here. And from the front of that neighbour, looking down their drive towards the property from Hickling Lane. Further up Hickling Lane, you can see a couple of other properties which again have dual pitched roofs, and this is them too from the front. So moving on to the proposal, this is the proposed site plan, which shows the extensions, the detached garage and workshop, and the enlarged driveway and hard and soft landscaping works. And this is the landscaping plan, which I think more clearly shows the existing footprint versus the proposed. So the red outline indicates what is present, and the purple outline indicates what was originally proposed, but it's been descaled now to what we're looking to assess today. So in terms of the extensions on this plan, so in the bottom right corner of the dwelling, there is a single story extension with a part lean-to roof, 2 gables and a part flat roof. Just above that, a 2-story extension facing towards that agricultural field to the side, a single-story front extension to replace the existing porch, a single-story link extension replacing the existing conservatory, linking the existing garage with the host dwelling. There would be a first floor extension to the garage, which would also involve the conversion to an annex, and then a 2-story rear extension in this corner and a 2-story extension on that lower element as previously mentioned. So moving on to the elevations, the top images from the front. So you can see the 2-story extension on the side. That's as present, but with some greater detailing added. The front extension, the first floor added to this gabled element, and on the bottom elevation, which is looking from the paddock, as I mentioned, looking to the side elevation, you can see the 2-story rear extension, a single-story side extension, a 2-story extension here. So the top image here is looking from the rear. So again, just going around the site, so you can see on the left a link extension, a two-storey rear extension, on lower ground, a single-storey extension, and a two-storey extension just behind that. So in terms of that link extension that was mentioned and the extension and conversion of the garage, this is what can be seen here. And as mentioned, a lot of detail is proposed to be added to existing and proposed gables, including the variety of detailing and fenestration alterations. Moving on to the floor plans, the bottom one is the lower ground floor plan, and the above is the ground floor plan, and then the first floor plan and the roof plan. It's worth noting that, again, there's kind of the theme of the dual pitched roofs and front and rear projecting gables. So moving on to the detached garage and workshop, the front and rear elevations, it's worth noting that you can see this dotted line across, and that indicates the existing ground level. So the proposed building is to be sunken quite deep into the ground through excavation works. And on the left-hand side, these dotted lines show the maximum height of the neighbouring property to the rear. It's also worth noting on the far right-hand side, this is the Hickling Lane, so that's the road level. And moving on to the side elevations, you can see a kind of similar thing in terms of the ground level and the height of the dwelling beyond. In terms of the floor plans, so you can see it's a 4-bay building. 3 of those look to be used as garages and 1 as a workshop, with a storage area at first floor. The roof form would be such that it would be hit with a front projecting gable. So moving on to the assessment or appraisal of the application, the main issues relevant to this application are the principle of development, design and impact upon the character and appearance of the surrounding area and the conservation area, and impacts upon residential amenity. The application property is located in the east section of the conservation area, as outlined in the conservation area appraisal and management plan. And this east section includes a mixture of building types, including many modern properties. So as mentioned, the application property is of relatively recent construction and is not of any architectural significance, whilst it does demonstrate strengths of the conservation area, including a dual pitch roof with projecting gables and the use of a red-brown brick. The proposed extensions would continue this theme whilst being sympathetic to the existing through the roof pitches matching the existing, the roof height not being increased than the maximum height, and the general layout being of a similar theme. It is considered by officers that the resultant dwelling would have more visual interest through detailing, fenestration and the general arrangement. It is noted that the extensions would not be subordinate to the host dwelling, which is often a requirement for householder extensions. However, officers would note that this guidance is of use so as to not deter from the character of an area. For example, in a row of very similar properties, a remodel differing from this pattern may distract from that character, whereas in this instance, there is no street scene or particular pattern of development. Concerns have been raised with regards to the overdevelopment of the site. The proposal would see an appropriate level of car parking, sufficient garden space, and although a notable increase in built form, there is no pattern of development in terms of property or plot sizes in this area. Therefore, officers are satisfied with the design and its effect on the host dwelling and surrounding area. The proposed garage/workshop would be set on lower ground than the highway, with a portion of the hipped roof potentially being visible. That said, its form would be considered to respect the character of the area, and therefore there are no significant concerns. Concerns have also been raised with regards to the garage/workshop being used as a dwelling. Whilst the building is of a notable scale, members are reminded that the application should be assessed as submitted. That said, should the application be approved, a condition would be implemented restricting the ability for the building to be used as a separate dwelling. In terms of hard landscaping, an enlarged driveway is proposed in addition to new patio areas and paths. And in terms of soft landscaping, it is proposed for several new trees to be planted, as indicated on green, kind of dotted around the site. All trees are proposed to be retained, and the works would be outside of the root protection areas, and these would be protected during construction as by condition. And similarly, all landscaping works would be agreed by condition. And then finally, in terms of neighbour amenity, there are no overshadowing, overbearing or overlooking concerns as a result of the proposed works, and that's due to the siting in relation to adjoining occupiers, in addition to the significant level of screening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker for this application, Mr. Richard Johnson. He is the architect on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Johnson, it's been explained to you that you have 5 minutes to speak. When you're ready, you press the button on the right. You will be warned when there's 30 seconds to go. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Our client purchased the property in 1995 and has been a long-standing resident of the village ever since. They approached HSSP in 2014 to explore the site's potential, and I have been involved since 2019. There have been 2 key deliverables from the project outset. 1, to provide a suitable family dwelling adapted to their current and future needs. 2, to provide a garage building for their car collection. Both elements are of equal importance to the success of the scheme. The existing property is a detached dwelling of mid to late 20th century brick construction, located in the most northerly part of the village and edge of conservation area. The existing dwelling does not have any notable architectural features or historic merit. It does, however, have sentimental value to our client and has an interesting plan form that responds to the site's steep topography. As such, retaining the essence of the plan form and material character were a key part of our brief. It was apparent, however, that retaining the 3-level plan form would be a challenge when seeking to provide the additional accommodation whilst respecting the scale and height of the existing dwelling. The existing garage is too small to provide for the client's needs, and with the growing family, there is inadequate accommodation within the existing dwelling. Careful consideration was given to the location of the proposed replacement garage, with a desire to utilise the former garage as annex accommodation for their extended family. This work culminated in the pre-app submission in 2020. The response outlined that the principle of the scheme may be possible, however, due consideration should be given to the overall scale of the dwelling and the garage. Importantly, this established the 2 key deliverables could be achieved, and through the planning process, we would seek to work with the planners to deliver a site-appropriate scheme. This amended design was submitted for planning at the end of 2020. There have been a series of unfortunate delays during this process, including multiple changes of case officer and the necessary time required to make the design changes. I would like to thank, however, Gregory Sharman and Stephen Bridges for proactively working with us to reach the current recommendation for approval. Briefly, I would like to address the comments raised and our design responses seeking to alleviate these concerns. The garage raised concerns by local residents, citing its scale as inappropriate, suggesting it was likely a route to enable future conversion to an independent dwelling. This is not the intention, and as such, we recommended the inclusion of a condition tying its use in perpetuity to the host dwelling. In respect to the scale, as mentioned, this related to the client's car collection. Furthermore, its chosen setting enabled the garage to be cut into the landscape and therefore reduce its visual presence. Through careful negotiation with the previous case officer and submission of revised plans showing clear reductions in scales, this element has been deemed appropriate in its setting. Further comments relate to the perceived visual impact of the proposals and impact on the conservation area. All of the relevant key views have been assessed, alongside further non-identified views to explore this potential impact. The supporting visual document outlines, like with many other properties in this area, they are well screened and not readily visible from the public vantage point. As demonstrated in the document, where the proposed extensions are visible, the alterations pose no immediate or obvious visible harm to its settings or surroundings. Our client also acknowledged the comments regarding the scale of the works to the dwelling and asked us to work with Rushcliffe Borough Council to come to a design resolution that ultimately achieved their brief, but responded positively to both the case and Conservation Officer comments. As a result, the proposed alterations have been significantly reduced. The previous contemporary rendered gables have been substituted for a more sympathetic traditional brick detail design with simplified and reduced glazing. The Conservation Officer has welcomed these changes and removed any objections. In terms of the design guidance, the case officer has acknowledged that although not all alterations may strictly be considered as subordinate in their own right, when considered holistically and against the setting of the original dwelling, they do clearly build upon its key characteristics. It's in a material language that is sympathetic to the conservation area.
30 seconds.
As such, in this instance, it is considered that the spirit of the neighbourhood plan policy has been followed, and coupled with the submission of the revised plan, provide for a scheme that can be fully supported at officer level. Thank you.
Thank you. Well timed. Right. Any members got anything to say about this application, please? Would like to start? Councillor Mason?
Thank you. Could I just ask what is the percentage of the extensions over the original house, please?
Unfortunately, I don't know that off the top of my head, and I've not got that in my notes. So I do apologise.
That's all right. It's just that sometimes it can be relevant and help us just to see how much bigger the house is. Sorry.
There is the site plan that kind of shows the difference in footprint, but like I said, I do apologise as
That
a
one.
percentage.
Oh, yes, I've seen that, and yeah, I just wondered about percentages. Well, actually, I have to say I quite like the house, and as I look here, I can't see that I can make any other decision but to support it. The planning policies, I agree with the officers on, and I would be happy to put it forward and to do it. But if others want to speak first, but if there are no others, then I will put forward the proposal. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Okay. So could you put your
Oh, sorry.
speaker on? Councillor Thomas, you were next.
I just had a few questions really, or three. I was just going to ask, are the sort of vaulted windows, these big windows, are they a feature in the local area? The second question was, it was mentioned about a car collection. Are these actually collectible cars, or are they just sort of normal family cars being called a collection, if you know what I mean? And the third question was, how many bedrooms is the house at present, and how many bedrooms would it have afterwards? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. In terms of your second question with regards to the car types, it's not something that we can kind of consider the type of cars or anything like that. The speaker just now mentioned that the client is a car collector, and we can go off of that, and we understand that it's for personal use, but that's as far as we know in terms of that. In terms of the number of bedrooms, I'll just go back to the floor plan. So these are the existing, and I think there's no bedrooms at lower ground or ground floor, and there is 2 and a study at first floor, but it's noted. And then at the proposed, so there'd be 1 at ground floor and a further 5 at first floor, so 6 in total.
That answer your questions, Councillor?
No, I asked one about the vaulted windows as well. I was just going to come back on the car collection. Does the condition on use on the garage deal with any situation where they may have cars to sell, or that sort of development? Thank you.
Yeah, so as we understand it, the occupier does collect cars, and you're quite right, there's a condition on there that's saying any use should be ancillary. A car collection is a hobby like any other hobby, so use of that garage to store them, to repair them, or in any way enjoy them would be part of that residential use. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit more.
Thank you. Councillor Edivine, please.
Wrong one. I've just got a couple of questions. One is, so in the report we talked about, and again, and some of the, if you like, comments in letters of objection talked about the agricultural field. And I believe there was a hedge there that's been taken out, and I think in the report it said there's nothing to stop them taking the hedge out. I do have a concern that it is an agricultural field and there should be some barrier of some sort. And is it possible to put that in as a condition, that they actually create some sort of barrier to differentiate between garden and agricultural field? And the second question was more, and it might be completely irrelevant, and but I do remember several years ago an application in a similar position, and a lot was spoken about. I think, is it Solney House? That's the Georgian house below it, and it was deemed a key view from across the Vale because you can see the Georgian house. And so really, it's just, is it considered? Are we sure that that's not impacting on, if you like, the strikingness, if that's the right word, of the building from a key view?
Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of your first question, there is an agricultural paddock to the side of the dwelling, and there used to be a hedgerow which was removed, which we've got no control over. That was done prior to the application being made. In terms of planning conditions, we can obviously put conditions on requiring things such as landscaping schemes, but we just need to be mindful that they need to be necessary for the development to be acceptable. So is the requirement to plant a hedge in that location necessary for the development to be acceptable, would be the question that I would put in members' mind in that relation. The application itself doesn't propose any extension into the agricultural paddock and wouldn't affect the paddock or the use of the adjacent residential land or the relationship between them in any way. So I would just put in members' minds there the question as to whether it is reasonable and necessary for the householder extensions to be acceptable to implement a hedge there. In terms of your second question on Solney House, as part of the negotiations on the application, as the architect mentioned, the change of materials from render to brick, and one of the reasons we looked at that was because of potential competition with Solney House, which is a rendered property. I think on the presentation there's a view that we've got that's been superimposed by the architect. Yeah, so that's taken from one of the key viewpoints in the conservation area. You can see the white rendered property and then the brick form of the application property in behind there. So the use of the material is actually considered to ensure it doesn't compete with the positive building. Thank you.
Did you want to come back?
If I can come back on that then, because I would like to see some sort of condition that absolutely keeps a barrier between what is agricultural land and garden land, because at the moment, what's to stop the agricultural land just being mown into a garden? And so I would have thought it would be reasonable to have, and I'm not saying the barrier should be a hedge or a fence or whatever it is. Personally, if it was me and I had the money, I'd probably put a ha-ha there, but that's, but I do think there should be some sort of physical barrier to denote the change between garden and agricultural land.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the only thing that I would say there would purely be there doesn't have to be a physical delineation for different uses to apply. If they did start using it for residential purposes, mowing it, etc., then obviously that would require a planning application for a change of use, which would be considered at that time. So if they did gradually start using it for other purposes, then we could deal with that at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. I can say from personal experience that if a hedge belongs to a particular house, if you want to take it down, you can, and you don't have to replace it. So it's up to you. I mean, if you've got a dog, obviously you'll put something up, but it's not necessary usually.
I think I recognise that there's no restriction on taking the hedge down, and I'm sort of slightly reassured that they do have to keep some sort of delineation between the two uses, and I'm sure that possibly if the agricultural field started becoming creeping into a garden, someone would no doubt be asking the enforcement officers to have a look. Okay.
Well, as has been pointed out, it would require a planning application, a separate one. Thank you. Councillor Bailey, you indicated next.
My question was actually exactly what you were, that Councillor Edivine has just asked, so, or very similar to that. So, no, I don't have a question now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Moore, you indicated.
Well, it was just really a comment on, I had a good read of it. One of the advantages of taking an old older house apart and rebuilding it, you're going to increase energy standards and insulation standards. I would hope the applicant has built this in, although I don't see much mention of it in terms of it should be a much more energy efficient house. My own comments, my own personal comments, it's lovely. But if I was the owner of it, I think with all the work that's going on, I'd have probably flattened it and built a new one. But yes, in my view, I just think it's an excellent application, and I don't see a problem with it.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, Councillor Walker, please.
It's a little bit fuzzy. Is it in line with the neighbourhood plan? Is what I'm after, just to get that confirmation. And also, just I don't think there was an answer to Councillor Thomas's question about the gabled windows. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the neighbourhood plan, the assessment is set out in the officer report and it is considered to align with the design codes of the neighbourhood plan. And in terms of the roof light windows, I believe on the presentation there's a photo of one of the properties actually on the main street just around the corner, which shows property having roof lights. There you go. Having vaulted ceilings with roof lights within that. So that's just one example.
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't. I obviously used the wrong word. It's the sort of big pointy windows and the vast expanse of glass, really. Are there examples of that in the local area?
In terms of that east section of the conservation area, as mentioned, I'm not aware of any within the immediate vicinity, but as mentioned, that area is in the conservation area appraisal that is noted as a modern area of varied designs, and whilst I'm not sure if there is any gabled windows as such, there is kind of a variation in the area, and that's why officers came to their recommendation on that.
Thank you. I have no further speakers at the moment. Oh, Councillor Thomas is indicating she wishes to come back.
Could I just come back to the issue of the field being used as a garden? Is there an advisory note about that? And could that be strengthened into a condition?
There is an advisory note. The paddock or field, excuse me, lies outside of the red line application site, so we can't put a condition on land that isn't within the application site. I do understand members' concerns on this one, but to reassure you again, any change of use to domestic use would require planning permission. So if we start to see, for example, it being mown and flower beds planted, football nets going up, picnic tables, that kind of thing, that's all evidence towards change of use that we could then apply that next part of the process. So hopefully that gives you a bit more reassurance on that matter.
Thank you. Right, does anyone wish Councillor Mason to propose?
Yes, I'd like, not a bit to it. I'd like to move the recommendation on page 26, please. To that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions. And there are various conditions after that, but also there's a note to applicant which alleviates some of the concerns that have been expressed here this afternoon. So yes, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Right, we go to the vote on this one. All those in favour of granting the application? I believe that's unanimous. Right, thank you very much for your questions and attention to detail of this one application. You'll notice at the back of the pack you've received that there were 3 appeals. I believe these were in January, came through in January, and the borough won them all with no costs involved. So those are just to note, please. And thank you for your attendance this afternoon, especially the substitutions that had to be made because of another meeting elsewhere. And I finished the meeting at